We're looking at Sidon. Next waymark in the shape of a Adramitium, Acts 27, verse 1 to 5. And we'll read Acts chapter 27, verse 3.
And the next day it touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself.
Okay, so in this verse we see Sidon, and that's what we are looking at today. So Sidon, what does that mean, first of all? Sidon can also be written as Sidon. It means exactly the same thing, it's exactly the same name. And what Sidon or Zidon means is hunting. Now, it's a special type of hunting. It's hunting in the sense of catching fish. Now, if you're somebody who's gone fishing before, you'll understand about this. What happens is you first have to be near the ocean or near the sea in order to do fishing, in order to catch fish. And you need to have a fishing rod. Let's say we'll use that technique. You could also use a net, but we're going to use a fishing rod. Then what happens is you put a bait at the end of your line, and then you cast your line into the sea. And then you have to wait. And then you have to wait some more. And then you keep on waiting. You're waiting for the fish to catch on to your bait and your hook. And then you keep on waiting until finally a fish bites into the bait and gets hooked. And then you're going to draw your fish out of the sea. So Sidon or Zidon, it means hunting. Hunting is in the sense of catching fish. When catching fish, you must wait. And what that means is to tarry. To wait is to tarry. Just in the same way we had to wait till one of the fish caught onto the hook. So you have to tarry in order to do this type of hunting that Sidon or Zidon means. So that's what we see. We see tarry as part of the meaning of the name Sidon or Zidon. So we're going to put that there, mean tarry. Then let's go to Acts 27, verse 3 again.
And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself.
Okay, what I want us to look at now is refresh himself. It says, and Julius courteously entreated Paul. That means he treated him very kindly, was very nice to him, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. So the next word we're going to look at is to refresh. What does that mean? Well, refreshing, I'll explain it this way. Let's say, for example, you're very, very thirsty and you would like some water. And then you get a nice cold glass of water. That feeling that you get when the water is going down your throat and oh, you're just feeling much better. We're going to call that being refreshed. Now, in order to be refreshed in this example that I'm using, you're going to need water. So we can look at refreshing as the feeling that we get when there is water. Another time when there's a refreshing when we're looking at planting and when we're looking at growing fruit trees or looking at growing plants is when there is rain. We get water when there is rain. So that's another type of refreshing. So there we've got our clouds there, we've got refreshing, and we've got the rain coming down. So this is what happened to Paul when he got to Sidon. And the reason is because there were Christians over there. So from his trip, he's a prisoner. From his trip, when he gets on the ship of Adramyttium at Caesarea, and the next day they come to Sidon, Paul has not got a lot of clothes and all the things he would like to have on this trip. So when he gets to Sidon, they find out that there are Christians on that place. Julius allows him to go and be refreshed. So you can imagine they got him some stuff, some warm clothing, maybe some blankets, and all the things that he would need on his journey to Rome. So this was so refreshing for Paul. And when we look at it, we're looking at it in the sense of rain. So there's a refreshing when we get to Sidon. Then, so there we've placed our refreshing. Then the next thing that happens, we need to look at when was Sidon first mentioned? Where in the Bible is Sidon first mentioned? And we will find that Sidon is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, verse 15. And when we look at that passage, it will explain to you that Canaan, he had a son, and his son was called Sidon. So Sidon is actually somebody's name. It's Canaan's son. Then, when we go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 1, you find out that Noah's son is Ham. Then, when we go to verse 6, you find out that Ham's son is Canaan. And then, when we go to verse 15, the verse we started with, that's where it tells us that Canaan's son is Sidon. So Sidon is actually the name of Canaan's son. And if we take some time to count, how many generations do we get? Well, we'll get Noah, number 1. Then we get Ham, number 2. We get Canaan, number 3. And then we get Sidon, number 4. So Sidon is the 4th generation. This is very important. Sidon is the 4th generation. So we're going to put that, Sidon, he is the 4th generation. What else do we get? Well, when you're reading the Bible, you will find that Sidon is always mentioned with a place, or many of the times it's mentioned with a place called Tyre. And what happens is Sidon came first, and it became a place. So this name became a place, and it's a place that's next to the ocean. So that's why we saw connected there the hunting that talks about fishing. It's because Sidon is next to the sea. So Sidon is next to a place called Tyre, and Tyre is also near to the sea. And Sidon, it came first, and it was a very powerful place that had many things, and it was able to build Tyre. So Sidon is the one that helped build Tyre. Then Tyre also became big, and it also became a place or a city that had many things. And another thing that happens when you're reading the Bible, you'll notice is that Sidon and Tyre are always with a group, or many of the times they are with a group of places. So we're going to look at an example of that. when we go to Jeremiah chapter 25, verse 22, it says,
and all the kings of Tyrus, and all the kings of Sidon, and the kings of the isles which are beyond the sea.
So I hope we saw that. We had Tyrus, we had Sidon, which is Sidon, and then we had the kings of the isles. And isles just means islands. So many islands. So you've got Tyrus, 1, you've got Sidon, 2, and then you've got a group of places, which is these isles or these islands. We can look at another example in Joel chapter 3, and the verse is 4.
Yeah, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the courts of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head.
Okay, so that's what it says. We've got Tyre, Sidon, and we've got coasts. So that's just places that are near to the sea or the ocean. So now we've seen that Sidon, it means, the meaning of the name has got tarry. It's talking about hunting, but it's the type of hunting where you have to tarry. And when Paul was there, he had a refreshing. We found out that Sidon is the name of a person, and he's the 4th generation from Noah. And then we saw that Sidon likes to be mentioned with Tyre and a group of places. Now, what this sounds like in our time is 2001. So Sidon, in this trip of the ship of Adramyttium, it stands for 2001. We also understand 2001 to be 9/11. That's another way of saying it. It's exactly the same way mark, and it's exactly the same time. So 2001, 9/11. And the way we can understand that is we see that there's a tarry time, and we know in this movement that we have a tarry time that starts 2001, 9/11. And the refreshing that Paul experiences can be talking about the latter rain. And we know that we have the beginning of the latter rain, 2001, 9/11. And then because Sidon is the 4th generation, it also adds to the fact that it must be 2001, because since 1989, we are in the 4th generation of Adventism. And so when we find out that Sidon is the 4th generation from Noah, it helps us to see that it's talking about our time. And then another thing we see is that Sidon and Tyre are always mentioned with a group of places. And if we look in the book of Revelation, there's also some places that are mentioned there, some countries and nations, which also have this order. So, but the Bible calls it the beast, the false prophet, and dragon. So, Sidon is the false prophet. Tyre is the beast, and then the group of places are the dragon. So these are the things that help us to see that the Bible is talking about 2001 in the ship of Adramyttium when Paul is at Sidon. So we're going to end it there for today. Amen.